Right now, we're going to jump into a question from a listener. Today's question comes from a YouTube comment on the Valentine's Day episode where I interviewed my wife and we discussed budgeting in marriage. Today's question is from Casey. And before I read Casey's question, Casey, I want to thank you for being a regular listener to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast and for interacting with us through the comments section on YouTube. So today, Casey asks, thank you for the video. My wife and I have been budgeting with a rear view mirror. We save all of our receipts and import them into Excel after the month is over. Not sure we would have the motivation to try budgeting before the month happens. It seems like an awful amount of work to me. Any thoughts? Thank you for your question, Casey. It's one that gets to the very core of why would you budget. What you're actively doing now is what I would refer to as tracking your expenses. I'm in the middle of reading the book, Your Life or Your Money. And that particular book puts a major emphasis on tracking and also graphing. They call it your wall chart. Put up a wall chart where you are graphing month to month what your expenses actually were and what your income is. That way you can visually see where your money's going and you can become a little bit more mindful of what you're doing with money. Simply improving your awareness of your money through tracking is valuable. You and your wife are probably getting a great deal of satisfaction and control and growth by just tracking where your money's going. It's making you more self-aware when you're going to spend. However, it's not necessarily a budget where you're telling every dollar what to do before you spend it. The good news I have for you is if you're motivated to do a budget and you're motivated to assign every dollar a mission before the month begins, you've already done the bulk of the work. One of the biggest and most time-consuming roadblocks that I've seen with clients as they're working on starting a monthly budget is getting those line items listed, getting their categories organized, getting their subcategories organized, and then not even knowing where to begin with the numbers. How am I supposed to know how much money I spend on food? How am I supposed to know how much the electric bill or the water bill is going to be? You don't even have this concept of where to start. But if you're already tracking your expenses, well, you already have a very nice roadmap that can make a template for the upcoming month. If you take your previous month's expenses, all tracked out and all divvied up into the categories that you want to have in your budget, then all you have to do is look at them and ask yourself if they're going to be a little higher, lower, or the same. Then you can go through and very quickly allocate all of your anticipated income to these categories and create a zero-based budget where your income minus your saving, spending, and giving is equal to zero. I'm going to cover budgeting in more depth in future episodes after we get through a couple more where we discuss debt in more depth. But for now, the biggest factor that you need, that you're asking for, is motivation. And there are two things I want you to ask yourself when it comes to doing a monthly budget. I want you to ask, why do I want to do a monthly budget? Why do I and my wife want to do this ahead of time? Without a why, without a satisfying reason, you're not going to be able to get the motivation, even if it's a minimal amount of work. My personal why, my personal reason for a budget is because it gives me control over short-term and long-term goals. It also allows me to tell my money proactively what it's going to do instead of reactively adjusting the next month to what it is that I've already done. The budget is a way for me to proactively know if I'm on track for my short-term and my long-term goals. It tells me what I can spend on my needs and my wants in order to make my genuine goals, my biggest priorities, a reality. It also gives me a roadmap where I can figure out how long it's going to take me to make my dreams a reality. It allows me to put goals and priorities on paper on purpose with Amanda so that we can be on the same page with our goals. And if there's something that she wants to see come to fruition in the future that's not on my radar, then she gets to tell me about it as we're doing our budget meeting. We get to put it on paper on purpose and be on the same page. I get to support her goals, her hopes and dreams for the future, just as she gets to support mine. The last bit of hope that I want to leave you with, Casey, is you have already done the bulk of the work when it comes to writing a budget before the month begins. It does take practice. It takes about 3 months of practice. Now, I've been doing a budget with Amanda since we've been married, and it was a little bit slow getting started, and we would spend a fair bit of time talking about the budget early on. But now, before each month, we probably spend only 15 minutes actually meeting and going through the budget before we begin spending, saving, and giving. I hope those thoughts help you, Casey, and I hope that you continue listening to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast as we, in future episodes, dig deeper into budgeting.